I'm back, and it's time for another Not Hobb update. I don't even remember what made me pick this book up, but I'm so glad I did, because I read it, I think, 3 times last year, and probably will read it again fairly soonish, because it's about, well, killer mermaids. The book opens with the description of a mockumentary style crew that's gone out on a yacht to prove the existence of mermaids. They were supposed to not be real. Everybody on board the ship was killed, there was leaked footage, there was drama, and now a second trip has been arranged. And this follows that second trip. And I have to say, it's very cinematic. It's very much, you can see it. You can see the camera angles, you can see it. It's very, for a book, incredibly visual. And I very much compared it to the movie Alien. That first Alien movie where you're not quite sure what's there and there's funny noises and the lighting's just that little bit dark and you're a little bit jumpy. That's kind of the tone for quite a bit of this book. And it's really well done. Now, as you can see, it is written by Mira. Some of you may not know, but Mira is a pseudonym for the author Seanan Maguire. And she is remarkably prolific and has a significant number of works in the fantasy genre. I've read a few of those as well, also fabulous. But under Mira, it tends to be more horror leaning into that science fiction fantasy, that darker kind of zone. I've read a few now as Mira, and I'm a fan. Very much so. So, in this book we follow a fairly small cast of people. There's quite a large crew on this second ship that's gone out. And for those who are interested, the first ship was called the Atargatis, which was an Assyrian goddess who was shaped like a mermaid. And the second ship is called the Melusina, which is another word for mermaid. Just because I'm a geek and I had to look them up because I'm like, that's going to mean something. And yeah, they do. The author has a bunch of neurodivergent issues that she lives with, and that is portrayed really well in some of the characters in the book. It's not a big deal, it's simply part of who they are, and it's never drawn attention to just sort of say, look, inclusivity. It's just there, and I really appreciate that. Several of her characters use American Sign Language because 2 of the crew are deaf. And again, it's not kind of pointed at to be, oh look, inclusivity. It's more, people who are deaf are part of our community. And I actually felt really guilty reading this because it made some very good points about why we should at least be able to sign, hi, I'm not ignoring you. And yeah, that's something I'm going to have to, it's on my to-do list. I don't leave the house much. It's not something I'm desperately in need of doing immediately. However, it is something that, just purely for courtesy's sake, I should probably look into. Anyway, that's kind of secondary to the point. The point is, there are deaf characters in the story. Their deafness is important to the story, in that the way they interact with the world becomes very relevant to the story. And I thought that was wonderfully done, because it very much wasn't oh, look, we're having deaf people be the stars of the... No, they're simply part of the crew and they're part of the problem solving. And it's very atmospheric. So if you want a horror book that isn't like squeamishly horror, that isn't a psychological horror, and I'm looking at you, Stephen King, because some of your books are disturbing, this is one of those suspense horrors. Again, I'm going to compare it to Alien, because it's that tension that sort of ramps up and you're like, And as the story progresses, you're getting little snippets of what information did come back from that initial voyage that wasn't supposed to find mermaids. And you're getting little bits of lectures that have been given by a cryptozoologist who are saying, well, mythology for centuries has spoken about women of the sea who lure men to their deaths. So this killer mermaids, we're not talking we're going to romance these men away and lure them to the depths. No, these are sirens. These are the strange noises that draw you because you're curious, and then you're trapped and they're going to kill you. And yeah, I really enjoyed this. I liked the way it didn't try, I think it succeeded quite well in going, maybe there are. And if there were, maybe this is how. And taking you down a pathway of reasonably simple suspension of disbelief. I was happily on board for the whole thing. And that's refreshing, because at no point did I sit there and go, whatever, okay, I'll take it, I'll go. I was there. I was on board the whole way. And it finished really well. It tied up everything really well. And after writing Into the Drowning Deep, we then get a prequel novella of that original voyage, which is called Rolling in the Deep, which has a very similar kind of style to it, in that that initial crew was supposed to be a mockumentary. So there are camera people on board, there are hosts, there are people who are supposed experts, and the secondary voyage, again, funded by the same company, who have lost staff and performers and have been sued by people because everybody got lost. And yeah, so it gives it a really modern feel to quite an old-fashioned kind of story, because it's very much it's a ship story. There's only them. There's them with all the technology that uploads to the cloud and they can contact people, but it's just them. There is no help that can just arrive after a phone call. They're in the middle of the ocean and they're on their own. And those mermaids, kind of scary, but very cool. And I can highly recommend it because it was glorious. It was so much fun to read. And it's a really fast read, in the same way as one of those movies. You look at them and you go, oh, it's an hour and a half, 2 hours. Yeah, I've got that much time. And then suddenly it's over and you're like, wow. This is one of those books where you just start reading and then suddenly, whether it's a few days or a week, depending on how fast you normally read, I'm a pretty quick reader. This was like a 2-sitting read for me. And loved it. Loved every minute of it. Highly recommend it. It's a smart science fiction, fantasy, thriller, horror. Yeah, I think that's all of them. And it has, for all that I'm saying, it doesn't sort of go, look, inclusivity. It is a very inclusive read because we have deaf characters, neurodivergent characters, LGBTQTI characters, and all of it just feels very balanced, very organic. It 5 stars from me. It's been a reread already for me. It will continue to be a reread for me. And there's not really much more I can tell you without ruining the story. So I'm going to leave it there. So, like I've said so a lot. I'm sorry. I'm not a fan of filler words. If you would like to hit the like and subscribe, I would very much appreciate it, because apparently those are the rules when you're on YouTube. These are the things you have to say. With that, I'm going to love you and leave you, and I'll see you next time.